Good evening. Tonight I would like to continue our little tutorial here on the fuel distributor or fuel divider for the Mercedes-Benz KE Jetronic. And I pulled up the chapter 7.3 subchapter 160, and that is conducting the fuel quantity comparative measurement. This is done to test the fuel divider or fuel distributor while it is in the car. And I'm pretty sure some of you have been on the online forums, have seen this device. This is a flow meter which was made by Bosch. This is the KDJE-P200. There was a 300, which this manual I have here requests to be used. When we go down here where it says tools, you will see that they actually wanted the 300, which was a little bit better than the 200. The 200 was primarily used with the 450 4.5 liter engines and the 3.8s and 3.5s and 5.0 liter engines, and then with the 4.2 and the 5.6 came these testers here. I just would like to refer you real quick here to the table book before we get any further. I have this here, and I wanted to show you this real quick here, is that the fuel volume is the same whether you have a 102, 103, 104, 116, 117 or 119 engine. It doesn't matter. So this applies to many different cars who have the CIS installed as the primary, as the fuel distribution, fuel injection system. And the way the system works, basically, let me show you this here in the picture. I got this off the internet here from a fellow who was adjusting this. You have two glass valves here, left and right. One has a scale from 0 to about 15, and the other one goes from 0 to 130. That is either, you can say, cubic centimeters or milliliters. 15 milliliters, 130 milliliters. And then they have a rotary knob up here, which you go to. Leerlauf means idle speed, and then Teillast and Volllast is full power and partial power, basically. So you switch this depending on what you want to test. The 8 hoses are connected to the fuel distributor to the top here, to all 8 ports from 1 to 8, and the return line actually goes back to the tank. So all you do is you basically disconnect the regular metal fuel lines which go to your injectors. You just take them out of the way and you hook these lines up with these type of connectors. That's how this kit basically came. They were crimped on there basically, and they screw right in. That's all there is to it. And they said to take off the tank filler cap, and this is the return hose that will go back to the tank and pump this in. And this is done while the car is not running, preferably with a charger on the battery, because it will take a little while. And you take the fuel pump relay out and you jump out terminals 7 and 8. And then the way they do this, I will show you this in the manual, is they push button 1, they go to idle speed. And now comes the interesting thing, is they do an adjustment on here with this tool, which is a Bosch tool as well. This is not the one I wanted. Let me see if I can open this up here. Open with photo gallery. This will work a little bit better. This here, this is basically a set screw which is adjustable. It clamps on the metal bridge which is screwed to the top of the fuel distributor of the flow meter. And with this one, you can actually adjust and lock the plate in position while it is pushing up against the piston. This part is called they call that a test trolley. And then they're referring to this in here. When they do this, press and hold measuring key number 1. This is now to calibrate this deflect sensor plate by means of the adjusting device. So this unit here is what they call the adjusting device, which had Bosch part number M200/2 or KDJE-W100. Good luck trying to find this. So what they do is they set this thing up and you adjust that plate basically by turning it up and down until you're reading here, which is right here, 4 milliliters. There is, you can see this, there is 2 floats in each one. This is a black one and this is a red one. And that fuel will flow up, and depending on how much fuel flow you got, this was calibrated by weight. That will displace that little filler thing here, that little indicator will float then up to 4. So when you're at 4, then you have adjusted your plate correctly. And then you basically go through, you write down 4, you do this on cylinder number 1, then you release this, you go push 2, you will see where this winds up, you take the reading, you write it down, you push 3, you take the reading, you push 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you switch this thing over to Teillast, Volllast, and you do the same thing, and this time you're gonna set this to, for the higher speeds, at 30 milliliters for partial load and 100 milliliters for full load. And then you go through again. You did this with 1. Now this one is going to move up first to 30 for your partial load. You got that then adjusted. Then you push 2, you take the reading, write it down, 3, 4, 5, and so far and so on. And then you go and adjust it to push 1, and you adjust it for 100 milliliters. And that's basically on how to verify on how well and how balanced your fuel distributor actually is. And the reason why you do this, or why we used to do this, was because the fuel distributor will have, you know, impurities getting in there on the intake, which settle down. Whether now you have ethanol or non-ethanol fuel is not really that important, but you're always going to have some dirt coming in from the tank, even going through all that filtration which is in there. And that dirt and sediment will settle inside these small little cavities, and they will imbalance the fuel flow between 8 cylinders, all 8 cylinders, or 4 cylinders, or 6 cylinders, or on some vehicles 5 cylinders. If you have an Audi, for instance, they had a 5-cylinder. What you can do is on this system here, since it is pretty much the same on other vehicles too, is if you don't need to use all 8, you can put blind plugs on those to seal them off, and then you just leave the numbers of ports open with these hoses on there for the amount of cylinders you're actually trying to test. So on 4 you would do 1 to 4, on 5 you do 1 to 5, 6, 7, and 8 would be closed off, on 6 you use 1 to 6, and 7 and 8 are closed off. Now this system works really well, and it gives you a very, very good idea on how good your fuel distributor actually is. The other thing is there's wear and tear associated with these because of that plunger moving up all the time, you know, and then they're exposed to heat, exposed to cold, so temperature variations. And then so you have that, and that's going to cause wear and tear, so they're going to go out. This system works well for this, and it was designed for this. But if you look at the fuel distributor itself, you can see that all 8 ports where we're connecting to are on the top side. All 8 adjustment screws are on the bottom. This is these ones here, these recessed ones. Now, this should even tell the guy who is not the sharpest knife in the drawer that you probably cannot adjust this while it is in the car, and you cannot use the system the way it is designed to actually do the calibration of those. And this is why I want to do actually to build a calibration bench and make a video of this so people actually can see on how this actually works, because in this system everything is inverted and you have to work with the top down. You have basically an adjustment device here too, but like I said, this is actually calibrated in percentage from 0% to 100%. And since the 100% is basically full load or full load, it's 100% displacement, then and that's 100 milliliters, then idle speed is a 4% displacement. If you watched my other video, I said between 3 to 5. And that's basically how that is set. So you have 3 positions. You have 4%, 30%, and 100%. And basically at 100% fuel flow, just to give you an idea, that number now, that 100 milliliters is of course per cylinder. So now you have 8 cylinders. That means you're gonna be using 0.8 liters per minute. And if you multiply that by 6, that would be, now I don't have the calculator, let's see. My math at night is not as good as it is during the day. At least that's what I'm like to tell myself. So let's do this. If our calculator comes on, we have 0.8 liters per minute multiplied by 660. So we're using 48 liters per hour, okay? And let's just say we know this is under full load, and we have the 9-to-1 compression engine with 242 horsepower of 249 horsepower. The maximum speed would be 225 kilometers per hour. We have slightly over 110 liters of fuel in the tank. So we basically can do this for 2 hours. So we multiply this by 2. That means we have used 96 liters in 2 hours. And of course, we have traveled at 225 kilometers an hour multiplied by 2. We have traveled 450 kilometers in 2 hours at maximum speed. The accelerator pressed to the floor all the way, and we never got off once. So that gives us a fuel rate. We want to know how many liters do we use per 100 kilometers. So we have to divide 450 by 100. That gives us 4.5. So we take the 96 liters and divide them by 4.5 liter. That's our multiplier. We have used 21.33 liters per 100 kilometers. And if you Google this, you can actually convert this into miles per gallon. And I would guess that would be probably around 10 to 12 miles per gallon, or 8 to 12 miles per gallon at full speed. Could be a little bit higher because the EHA valve in this test is turned off. So we have a constant 0.4 bar differential between the 2 chambers, which means that we have no enrichment. If the enrichment kicks in, because we have depressed the throttle through the accelerator pedal all the way, our throttle position switch now is engaged in the fully open throttle, which gives us maximum enrichment from the computer, from the so the EHA valve is fully open, so it is fully enriched basically. That's what I'm trying to say. So realistically, we're probably gonna wind up at 24 liters to 26 liters per 100 kilometers of actual fuel consumption, and then you're going to be closer to 7 to 8 gallons or something like this 7 to 8 miles per gallon in that range at full speed. If you have the 300 horsepower, then you're probably going to be even higher with the 10 to 1 compression, and the fuel consumption there is higher too, because that is going to regulate itself even more, enrich more because of the higher compression ratio. You will get a little bit more fuel in there. But this is basically on how this works. Now I can stretch this again. This is a wonderful test, and I envy every one of my viewers who has one of these KDJE-Ps, whether it's the 200, the 300, or the later version of this. It is a wonderful tool, especially if these little floats are still accurate. They really don't need to be calibrated, but if they're stored carefully and kept in dehumidified or temperature controlled environment, they will last for a very long time. You could build something yourself because the whole system itself works pretty simple. This is basically connected here to these valves. These push buttons are valves, and the valves come together and they feed both tubes, and the tube is basically turned off on top. You select it, and then from there it goes automatically out. So any mechanically inclined person who can find a flow meter for fuel can basically build that themselves. 15 milliliters, 130 milliliters. And again, all the numbers you need are in here. Now, in order to, in the manual here, this is chapter 7.3, subgroup 160. Just to give you, but this is not suitable for a calibration after a rebuild. This is way too inaccurate. The best you can measure, you can see this, is partial load is 4 milliliters at 30. So you have like a 10% tolerance in there, which they allow you in this between full load, which you can actually read. But this is way too inaccurate to actually calibrate a rebuild or a new fuel distributor. These numbers are much lower. This system was designed when the customer comes into the dealership and complains about a rough idle and that sort of stuff, and the car has 80,000, 100,000, 120,000 miles on it, and it is X amount of years old. And the interesting thing too is the way they calibrate this is by using measuring device key 1, which would be basically your cylinder number 1. Is if I adjust this and I would measure the plate clearance here, say like on one car, on my car right now, and I would adjust this for this 4 milliliter flow at idle speed, and I bring in another car and I adjust this here to exactly the same displacement of the plate, then the fuel reading will be definitely different. And that would depend upon the mileage of the vehicle, the age, and how it was garage stored, and all of this stuff. So this is really only something to check a individual distributor at that point of moment to see on how good or how bad the internals actually are, and whether or not you have to rebuild it. They did this back then because the replacement cost of a fuel distributor, this part here from Bosch through Mercedes-Benz, was close to $10,000 in the 1980s and 1990s. And then when they didn't sell any new ones anymore, then Bosch started to remanufacture them. And in the 2000, Mercedes-Benz charged $6,500 for a Bosch rebuilt fuel distributor, just that you have an idea of what you're looking at with the numbers. This is no joke. You can look up the part number for that on the dealership websites. You will see that these fuel distributors are still listed as no longer available, but they will show you the price of what the last price was, as long as they were available. And the last time I checked, they were at $6,500. And so this should give you an idea, and this is why we need a different test setup or calibration setup. This is a test setup, and when you rebuild them, or build a new one, then you basically need a calibration setup. Now, I know that people are selling them on eBay, and I bought the one I have in my car right now is a rebuilt one from an eBay fellow. I bought that now in January of 2021. So I had that now in for 12 months. This is almost 1.5 years, and that is fine. And I would think he rebuilt it with this unit here. And I have to say he has done an outstanding job, and he's definitely within the tolerances of what they're saying in here. But it is not the same as if you buy a new or rebuilt Bosch unit, if you could get them, if they were still rebuilding them, because the tolerances are much lower. And like I said, as these tolerances go out of whack from the day they were manufactured because of wear and tear, and then pollution, dirt, which comes in through the fuel system, which is unavoidable basically. And then if you add ether on top of it, then you're gonna have a little bit more, issues to deal with. When they're built, they were supposed to last 15 years or 150,000 miles. I've said that before. And if they're rebuilt to these specs here, you can expect a life expectancy of 3 to 5 years before you would have to rebuild them again, because of the 10% tolerances they're using here when they basically calibrate them to these numbers here. That is just food for thought. So I hope I can build one of these calibration fixtures the way we built them back in 1987. I think it was 87, could have been 86, but I think it was 87, for the manufacturing. That was for Bosch, for their distributor manufacturing facility in Stuttgart, where they were actually making these here. And they had a different setup, and that was done very different. And that will be then the other video once we get to this. This will be in some time from now. This is not going to be anytime soon, as for one, is I have to raise the money for this to build that. It won't be cheap. I would guess probably around 5 to 10 grand actually to build one of those, to get these specifications and set up the way we had it, so you get a good idea of what that actually looked like it in comparison to this unit here, the tester basically. This is just a tester, cannot be used for calibration. Way too inaccurate. And with that, I would like to thank you for subscribing and liking my videos, and I hope you will join me in my next video, and you have a great evening.